Um, and remember that we're being recorded tonight. I want to briefly introduce Emmy Shoup. Emmy is City of Sisters Assistant Community Engagement and Program Coordinator. She is a co-host on the call and is also helping to manage the city's, the presentation the city will be giving in a little bit. So welcome Emmy to the community and appreciate her participation in this event tonight. I also want to introduce three board members from C4C. Wendy Birnbaum, wearing her chat room monitor hat there in the corner. Wave to us all, Wendy. Wendy is going to be monitoring the chat function, which you can open by clicking on the word chat down at the bottom of your screen, and you'll see a list of comments that people are offering in the chat function. And I'd encourage you to open that now and leave that window open. You can drag it to the side of your screen. There are many different ways for people to participate tonight and to engage in the conversation. One of them will be simply to type something into the chat and make sure it's addressed to everyone, and then hit return and it'll show up in the chat room. And Wendy will be trying to monitor those and combine them and synthesize those into questions that maybe would be appropriate for discussion in the group. I also wanted to introduce Robin Holdman, whom I know many of you know is the chair of the C4C board. There we go. And Chris Lang, who has been intimately involved in helping plan tonight's event, is also joining us there. Speaking of Chris, Chris is going to spend the next few minutes reviewing the C4C assumptions and agreements, which are kind of the ground rules for tonight's discussion. And if I'm lucky, I'll be able to share a copy of that right now. Perfect. Let's just have a thumbs up. Are you seeing the assumptions and agreements now?
Perfect. Thanks, Pete.
Okay.
Yeah, on behalf of C4C, I want to welcome you and thank you for coming to Let's Talk, which was designed to encourage active dialogue in our community about anything of interest. So as you identify other topics that you would like us to create a Let's Talk forum for, please let one of the board members know. Our assumptions in creating that kind of dialogue is that we welcome the diversity and include everybody in our community because we all have different perspectives and we can learn from one another. From that standpoint, we want to hear everybody's opinion and welcome that diversity, but what we ask that you speak in the first person, not for some larger group, just for yourself. And please listen with curiosity. We, like I say, can learn from each other if we really try to understand another person's point of view. We want people to show respect. So what that means is paying full attention to people. I mean, I know we're in our own homes and it can be a little distracting, but one thing about the mute button with Zoom is if you are talking and you happen to have your cell phone next to you and you get a call, we'll hear it. So, or anybody else in your family, if you have an open door like I just noticed behind me, I'm going to go close that after this, just so that we aren't distracted by other things going on in your life. And I ask that you withhold any judgment, that we don't gossip about each other afterwards. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and that's what this forum is for. We're talking about ideas, not people. And if you kind of make a mistake, please apologize for it. Or if you can't tolerate the discussion, you're free to just turn off Zoom. But come back again. We always invite people to participate in these things, and we really do want the diversity. So thank you for coming tonight. And if you have a comment or a question, you can put them in the chat section so everybody can see it. Because we will all see the chat section. But I ask that you try to limit your individual comments or questions to 2 minutes maximum, so that there's the opportunity for everybody to have a chance to be heard. And then if it starts to lag and you have another question, go for it. So thanks very much for being here.
Thanks, Chris. I want to start with, we want to start with just a kind of a show of hands response to a series of kind of categorical questions. These are designed both to help us learn a little bit more about one another, but also to help our presenters from the city get a bead on what kind of an audience we have tonight for this event. So I'd ask you, as I ask each of these questions, just to raise your hand in response to the question. So our first question is, how many of you live within Sisters city limits? Okay. And how many in Sisters country more generally, roughly the school district? Okay, good. How many of you feel you already have a working understanding of land use planning system, the land use planning system in Oregon? So I should say there are no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, of course. So how many of you are engaged in day-to-day work that directly relates to the land use system? And how many of you consider yourselves retired? Okay, cool. Well, thanks. I want to introduce Scott and Nicole for this from the city. Scott Woodard is the Director of Community Development for the City of Sisters. Scott joined us, I don't know, a couple of months ago now, I guess. After 7 years as a senior planner for the city of Redmond. Nicole Mardell is the principal planner for the city of Sisters. And the two of them, together with Emmy, are going to give you a presentation about the work that they are going to be doing over a period of at least a year, I guess, in connection with the revision of the City of Sisters Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Now, during the presentation, please feel free to ask questions online by using the chat function, or orally by waving your hand and catching the attention of the moderator, and then I'll call on you, and you can contribute there, and we'll pause the presentation. Our presenters know that and are hoping for an interactive session with all of you. And so nobody will be put out if you join in. In fact, we want people to join in and ask questions and engage in their presentation as they are giving it. And we have plenty of time for this evening, so please don't feel constrained in joining in at any moment during their presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to whatever combination of Emmy, Scott, and Nicole are going to take the reins from this point. So go ahead.
Thanks, Pete. We're going to do a little tag team presentation tonight, but I'm going to start us out. Thank you, everyone, for hosting us tonight. This is a great opportunity.
Scott, we're having a little bit of audio. I don't know if other people are experiencing the same.
See some.
Yes, we're catching
folks who live in Sisters, and for you guys. Okay.
Just stop for a second. Hold on for a second there, Scott. Scott, we're having some technical difficulty. I think it's a bandwidth issue from your end, because we're getting intermittent audio and broken up video. sometimes when people have this experience, you can reduce the quality of your video signal. There's a,
Told my kids.
okay, wait, Scott told us earlier that he has a 16-year-old in the household who is his IT department. So I suspect Scott is consulting momentarily here.
I'm gonna go get closer to the router here, see if that helps.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
that's all right.
The other thing you can do, Scott, if it still doesn't work, is just not have your video running. Sometimes that'll make the sound work okay.
Okay. Let me just plug in here. All right, I don't know what you guys were able to hear, but I'll start.
Scott, we heard, I think, essentially nothing.
Okay, thank you. So, thanks, Pete. Appreciate the introduction. I am Scott Whitford with the Community Development Department. So we're happy to be here tonight to talk to you guys about the comp plan and future growth. I think Pete oversold my tenure just a little bit. It'll be 2 days. 2 days from now, I'll actually have been here for a full month. So, and I know that Emmy, I think Emmy has me beat by about a week, and I think Nicole's got us beat by about a year. So we're all relatively new to Sisters. We're going to rely a lot on you guys to tell us what you want to see, what you like about Sisters, what you want to see changed, and what you want to see it like in 2040, which is the horizon, the planning horizon for this comprehensive plan. We're looking out that far. Community input is a major foundation of a comprehensive plan. And so this is the first first real step we've taken so far to get out into the community. Over the next couple months, 3 months, we're going to be doing intensive work trying to get feedback, and we're trying to make sure that we hit as broad of a representation of Sisters as possible, and try to make sure we hit underrepresented groups that don't traditionally come out for these kinds of functions, so that we feel that the direction and the goals and the policies that come out of the plan are built on a good foundation. So with that, we're going to run through a little presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what a comprehensive plan is. We're going to talk also about how it relates to the Sisters Vision Project. That's a common question we get. And then we're going to talk about some community engagement strategies that you can look forward to in the community in the upcoming months, as well as take you through our project website, so that you guys can have a constant source of information as this project goes forward. As Pete says, this is going to take about a year to get through it. So we want you guys to get involved early and stay involved throughout the process. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Emmy. So what is a comprehensive plan? It's a master plan for the community. Like I said, it's based on community input. It's based on some studies, as you can see at the bottom, an economic opportunities analysis, which looks at the types of commercial and industrial opportunities the community wants to have in the future, and then strategizes how we can go out and make that happen. And also plays into how much land we want to zone for those kinds of uses. Well, we have a consultant on hand that specializes in this kind of stuff, and is actually doing some of the analysis as we speak, and these studies will come out probably after the new year, which we'll share with the community as soon as we get them. Also, fundamental component to a comp plan is a housing needs analysis. We utilize the population projections that Portland State puts out. Yes, sir.
Can I stop you for a second? I realize that I can't see all of the video from all of the participants, so you may be waving, jumping up and down on a trampoline and waving red flags, and I can't see you. So if you want to be recognized for a question, you'll have to unmute and make some noise, or you can say something in the chat room to be recognized, but I won't, if you're trying to get my attention by waving your hand, I won't be able to see you during the screen sharing session here. I'm sorry to interrupt, Scott, but I wanted to let folks know that I couldn't see him.
No problem. Yeah, if you want to stop me at all, just wave at me and I'll let you back in. So yeah, so it's based on community input and it's based on some technical studies that they all kind of come together to create a comprehensive plan. So we'll also be looking at, just go back one second, Emmy. So the housing needs is basically based on the projections of our population growth for the next 20 years. How many units is it going to take to accommodate that population growth? These are all things that are required by the state that we look at as part of a comprehensive plan. And so their rules guide much of this process. Another basic component of the comprehensive plan is compliance with the 19 statewide planning goals that include economic development, urbanization, housing, recreation, forests, you name it. There's a ton of them. There's some that don't apply, like coasts and the Willamette Valley. But we're required to comply with all the applicable ones. Somebody just in the chat, Pete, if you want me to answer these as they come along, somebody asked who's the consultant doing the EOA. The consultant is Johnson Consulting is the name of the group out of Portland. So the outcome of all this effort is a set of goals, objectives, and policies that will drive future decisions about growth by the city. It will turn into code amendments that are recommended from the comprehensive plan that turn into the actual nuts and bolts of how we review development in terms of where certain uses can go, how high they can be, how dense they can be. All those things are driven by our comprehensive plan. So, sometimes we have folks that see a development and they come forward and they ask why we can't stop that development. Well, a lot of these decisions are made actually during this point of the process. Those decisions were made maybe 5-10 years ago. So it kind of drives home the point of why this is such an important process, because it will inform those future decisions greatly. It looked like there's a question that came up. Pete, is that something we want to answer now?
Yeah. So the question is to rephrase it a little bit, is there a component of the comprehensive plan for keeping open spaces, like adding a park or the like? And I'd leave it to you, Scott, and your colleagues. I assume you may talk about that in the course of your presentation. If you're not going to, let's answer it now.
Sure. So the question was about parks and open space? Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. That's one of the major planning goals is open space and parkland. So, one of the recommendations that may come out of this is that we need to update our parks master plan, or we need to build more dog parks or more athletic fields, something along those lines. Those are definitely components of a comprehensive plan. Next slide. So, good question. Where does the comprehensive plan apply? You can see this map on the map. The only map is a map of our city, and the colored area is basically the city and the urban growth boundary. Where I came from, in just previous to this in Redmond, we'd have colored area, then we'd have a big tan area around it, which was the urban growth boundary, which it would be the areas that we would expand into first when we started filling up the interior. So you can see that that the urban growth, there is basically no land yet to annex and to expand into. So part of this process was to assess the potential to expand the UGB during this effort. Does that mean that the UGB, and when I say UGB, it's urban growth boundary. Does that mean that it's going to be expanded? Not necessarily. They're also going to look at how we're utilizing the space within our city. Can we do more infill? Can we, there's a lot of vacant parcels in the community. Should we be addressing those first for development before we expand? Those are all questions that will be looked at during the process.
Scott, a question for you. given that the city limit is the urban growth boundary currently, how will the city interact with the county in thinking about additional area within the urban growth boundary, since it will be, at least initially, outside the city limits and within this county geographically anyway? How does this process interact with county planning?
Well, the county is definitely involved. Anytime we expand a UGB into into county area, they have to amend their comprehensive plan to accommodate it. We did several of these in Redmond recently, and actually Nicole was part of that process when she was at the county, and I was at the city of Redmond. But so the county is definitely involved. There's a formal process. There are findings that have to be made, legal findings. So they're definitely involved. We'll have a member of the county, the community development director, actually on one of our stakeholder committees. So he'll be heavily involved in this process, and the county will too.
And Scott, if I may just add to that, I mean, keep in mind that this process is only for the UGB study itself. So it's really only looking at how much land do we need, how much land do we need for residential, commercial, park space uses, how many acres do we need, and kind of ranking where that area would be the most efficient to include in our urban growth boundary. The actual expansion of an urban growth boundary and that exercise with the county is a full kind of other step. It would come after full adoption of the comprehensive plan, probably a year or two after, because it does take quite extensive findings. So just a note for everyone that it is its own separate process following something like a comprehensive plan update.
Nicole, we've received a couple of questions that kind of have an overlap, and they have to do with whether the scope of this plan will encompass Sisters Country generally, or is it more accurate to say it's limited to Sisters city limits?
Sure. So the scope of the City of Sisters comprehensive plan, the goals and policies that we'll be developing surrounding residential uses, park space, natural resources, all these kind of larger topics, those all apply to the city, because that's really where our legal authority resides, is within city limits. But of course, the goal 14, which relates to your urban growth boundary, that'll include some information just about Sisters Country in the lens of a potential UGB expansion, if that's what we need through all the background research that we're conducting.
Okay, I think we can move forward to the next slide. As I mentioned, the community of sisters will guide the plan. We want to hear from the people that live and work there and play there, because it's their plan. But there's also many other groups involved. We'll have a project management team, which consists of city staff. We talked about some of the consultants. Johnson Economics is the group doing the studies. I believe they're doing both they're doing the economic study. I think they're doing the housing needs study as well, or maybe NXT, I'm not sure. But NXT Consulting is actually playing a big role, because they were also involved with the Sisters Vision Project. And so we wanted to make sure that because the community went through that process just a couple of years ago, that we don't discount all that great feedback and information and recommendations that we got through that process. So they're doing an analysis to see what needs to be brought forward, as Nicole said, to be more sister specific versus Sisters Country. And then the Angelo Planning Group is the lead consultant team, who are very experienced with comprehensive plan updates, and their group is helping us helping to guide us through the process. So you'll see them involved in various engagement activities and public hearings and open houses. We have a couple of open houses planned. And then we have a stakeholder committee, which is made up of about 12 to 14 different people, some representatives from council, planning commission, the city manager, public works director, but also the superintendent of the schools, Ian from Forest Service, the Chamber, Economic Development, the fire department, just a whole wide range of agency partners that we work with to provide their technical expertise on the plan. And then a group that we're really looking to still fill with local community members is a community advisory committee, which will help us to ground truth the plan policies and concepts once we have some information, draft information to put together to react to. This community advisory committee is going to play a huge role in helping to make sure that we're on the right track. And here's a little plug. We're still looking for volunteers on that committee if you're interested. The deadline for that is October 28th. If you're interested, you can go on sisters2040.com and you can find information under Get Involved. We'll show you exactly where that is a little bit later in the process. And then there's a question that came up, and we might get this in a second. The Sisters Planning Commission, the City Council will be doing public hearings at the end of the process to adopt the comprehensive plan. So there's another opportunity to get involved. And then obviously it has to be accepted by the state of Oregon at the end. That's another good reminder that we have a DLCD, which is the Department of Land Conservation and Development, that will be reviewing the comprehensive plan. We actually have our local representative, Scott Edelman, on our stakeholder committee. So we don't want to get so far down the road and find out that the state's not going to approve our comprehensive plan, which I think happened to the city of Bend. So we don't want to do that. Okay, next slide. Why are we doing this? I think I touched on the fact that state law requires it to periodically update our comprehensive plan. The last time we did it was 2005, and you guys can see a little graph. Can't read the numbers probably, but it starts in 2010, goes to 2020, and that's our population increase. You don't need to see a chart to know that that's going on. You can just look outside and drive around every day. So we need to update all the demographic information and land use categories and all the information that is the kind of the basis for a comprehensive plan. We need to update this, and even though the state requires it, it's just good planning to do too. Next slide. And now I'm going to hand it over to Nicole, who is much more knowledgeable about the Sisters Country vision. She's going to kind of explain how the two relate, because that's a question that we were finding that's coming up over and over, which is a really good question. So Nicole, take it away.
Nicole, let me jump in and say that in the one of the chat suggestions was pointing out that the Sisters Country Vision plan has an element regarding ways to gain more diverse engagement in community issues. And so as you talk about the vision plan and its relationship to the comprehensive plan, that would be a good question to work into your response, if you could.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Pete. So yeah, so I think arguably the most frequent question that we get from folks already is just what's the difference between the Sisters Country Vision that we just completed and this comprehensive plan update. So just a reminder for those who maybe weren't involved in that process or weren't aware of it until this meeting, the purpose of the Sisters Country Vision was really to create kind of a more broad guiding document that related to just growth generally, who the city wanted to be, who the rural extension of the city, that being Sisters Country, really where we wanted to go in a variety of areas, whether it be the economy, whether it be in terms of resilience to natural disasters, to livability, and then of course community connections. So it was a lot broader than just land use. It tied into all these different areas, these key focus areas that really make a city great. There are these policies and strategies that came out of that, again, that some of them really did relate to planning and growth, but others related to organization of more community events, working of course on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. So it was quite a bit broader. The comprehensive plan is sort of in the middle of the vision and our development code. So we're taking a lot of what we learned from the vision and we're refining that down to focus on what was involved in terms of the built environment and planning. Part of the reason why we chose the consultants that we did, Next Consulting, is because they were the consultants that worked on the vision. So they have over 2,000 data points of community input that was already received on what makes Sisters a great community, what do we want to keep, what do we want to change. And the goal is to really build on that existing information and just get a little bit more depth in terms of how we make those great ideas really come to life through our development code and through other elements of our planning documents. So this graphic, I feel like it kind of, again, puts things in order. So you have your vision, which is much broader picture. You have your comprehensive plan, that's sort of in the middle, still pretty broad, but you're getting a little bit more into refined strategies. And then eventually your comprehensive plan will be enacted through your development code. So what you choose to put in your comprehensive plan will really be what's on the ground in the next 5, 10, 20 years following that adoption. In terms of some of the pieces that have already been accomplished in the vision, just to give you an example, again, rural broadband, that was a strategy that was included in the vision. I think it was also a comment for today. That's a multi-jurisdictional challenge. So EDCO is working with the city, keeping us updated. They're working with the county, they're working with Business Oregon, they're working with a variety of partners. That's something that will continue to occur, continue to be implemented through the vision, because again, it's that larger plan, that larger document. In terms of, I believe it was Amy's question about diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of our key goals in terms of the comprehensive plan is to really do extensive community outreach. We did include a diversity, equity, and inclusion component to our scope of work for our consultant to consider. We didn't go as far as reviewing a community demographics assessment, but I think that's definitely something that we can explore as we get a little bit deeper into this process. So thanks for providing that reminder, and we can definitely take a look at it.
Pete, this is Steve Swisher. I'd like to ask a question.
Go for it.
Hi, and Scott, just a quick introduction of myself. I'm the retired school superintendent in Sisters, but also am a member of the Deschutes County Planning Commission. And in addition to that, I'm also on the executive committee of the Vision Implementation Team. So basically have been engaged, but the county is also involved in their comprehensive plan at the same time, an update going on. And somewhere in there, there's some commonality. Sisters Country is really is by definition the boundary of the school district as well as the Camp Sherman area as we did our visioning process. But there are some commonalities that go on regarding like fire safe community and codes and those types of things. And it appears to me like there's some opportunity to look at the various codes and building codes that not only in the city, but also in the surrounding area of the county might become in alignment through, or a goal to become in alignment through the comprehensive plan. Further, the city has some type of code regarding vacation housing or overnight housing. The county does not, and that could be a process that the county, perhaps in Sisters Country, could bring together some alignment in those areas, whether you're in the city or in Sisters Country. I'm wondering, and my question is, with all of that, do you see other codes or opportunities that you might bring together with the county as well as the city that might help the cohesiveness of Sisters Country, not just the city?
Nice to meet you, Steve. I think I don't want to put her on the spot, but maybe Nicole could take this one. She's actually got some county planning experience just before she came to Sisters, so she has the benefit of working in both jurisdictions. Nicole, did you want to provide an answer to that?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great question, Commissioner Swisher. So there is quite a bit of overlap in terms of what you can coordinate on with a county jurisdiction as a city. I'd say one of the most notable is your natural resources. So as part of this, I think one priority that I've heard already from some community members is the desire to protect scenic views, open spaces, and a lot of those are currently outside of city limits, but may want to be protected in the future, especially if there were to be a UGB expansion considered. So that is one opportunity where when we're developing our policies as part of our comprehensive plan update project, that's the reason why we have Nick Lilac, who's the Community Development Director for Deschutes County, at the table with us reviewing these policies. He can inform us of how the county is kind of handling that section, and it's a part of our statewide planning goals. So how they're kind of handling that section of their statewide planning goal requirements and how we can best collaborate on that. Another one is natural hazards. So looking at the floodplain zone, looking at wildfire. The county has already done quite a bit of work in terms of wildfire and looking at some land use regulations, potentially some building code requirements. So it is an opportunity to learn from them. And although, of course, we are developing our own plan, it is helpful to have some of the similar requirements that they're pursuing. So I think there are plenty of opportunities like that just to coordinate on our relevant code sections.
Nicole, this is Pete. Maybe you could talk just a little in that same regard about the transportation components of this planning process. That seems like another potential area of interconnection with the surrounding jurisdictions.
Yeah, absolutely. So another key component is transportation. So surrounding city limits, we do have county roads. So the city has a transportation system plan. It looks at our road networks for vehicles, but also for pedestrians and bicyclists getting around the city and of course outside of city limits. So it is a great opportunity as well to involve the county's road department and also their senior transportation planner. We do kind of work closely together, again, just mostly keeping each other updated. Our public works department will really handle a lot of the TSP update work. So I believe they've already met, I believe, with some of the county staff, just again to work on some of that coordination.
Nicole, in these areas of overlap with the county planning processes, or maybe multiple processes, how do citizens engage in that process? What would you suggest to somebody who's on this call who's not already as engaged as perhaps Steve is in that process? Where are the points of entry for a resident?
Yeah, so I think as part of the comprehensive plan process, this is really the time to get involved. It's a really exciting piece of planning work that you can be a part of. You can find whatever element your interest lies in, whether it be the economy, natural resources, housing, there's a way to be a part of the conversation. So I'd say the easiest way, you could do it from home via the Zoom meeting that we're on right now, is just to attend some of our city and county meetings. The Planning Commission, of course, for the county, Commissioner Swisher is a part of that. So I believe they meet every other Thursday. So you could certainly reach out to him and just ask if there's anything interesting on the agenda surrounding their comprehensive plan, how they could attend those meetings. And then on the city side, our stakeholder committee involves, of course, a county representative. Those will be open meetings, so you could always attend those meetings just to hear a little bit more about what's involved. We won't really have the ability for everyone to be a part of the table and sit down and share ideas during that stakeholder group. It's meant to be more agencies and elected officials, but you could certainly attend those meetings to get informed and then submit comments or be a part of the community advisory committee. And we'll go a little bit more into our specific community engagement efforts on other ways to get involved as well, just a little bit later in our presentation.
Nicole. I apologize. I have a quick question. I'm not able to figure out how to send my question via the chat. And that's simply, is there any discussion or potential for expanding the city limits themselves? Or is that written in stone? And if so, why is that the case?
Sure. So the first step, if you were to ever consider expanding your city limits, is that you would need to have an urban growth boundary in place with area to grow into. So that was the map that Scott, our community development director, showed a little bit earlier in this presentation. As you can see, we're pretty much maxed out in terms of where our city limits are and where the urban growth boundary is. So at this point in time, we really could not expand the city limits because there's no land area that we could really expand into. if the city were to consider an urban growth boundary expansion, where we did add land to our urban growth boundary to grow into over the next 20 years, that would be a whole separate step outside of the comprehensive plan. And then following that would be annexation into city limits. Quite a bit of work involved with that. And Scott, having worked for a city before, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add or any more details on kind of how the city limit expansion comes into play.
Scott, you're muted.
Sorry.
There
Yeah,
you
I was doing the pantomime thing for you, Pete. So it was a little bit interesting when I came to Sisters from Redmond, because Redmond has quite a big urban growth boundary and also has an urban reserve area, which is an area even beyond that. So the urban growth boundary is the 20-year supply, and then the 30 to 50-year supply, 20 to 40-year supply is in another area even farther around that called the urban reserve. So it was a little bit interesting to me. I think one of my first questions to Nicole was, where's the urban growth boundary? And she said that's pretty much where the city boundary is. So that's going to be a big component of this process. It's required that we analyze if it does say recommends we need more units to accommodate the population, which it probably will. It's going to analyze, like I said, are we being efficient with our land within the existing boundaries before we expand the urban growth boundary? That was a big issue in Bend several years ago, where I think their first urban growth boundary expansion was denied by the state because they said they weren't using the land within the existing city boundaries efficiently enough with higher densities and infill. So it'll be an interesting discussion in the community to see where that shakes out on this particular one, because obviously we don't have any area to expand to. So is it expand some and be more efficient within our boundaries, or some combination like that? That's what we'll be looking at.
Robin, this is Pete. Robin, I wonder, is it possible for you to run the poll right now, to run the poll question that we had designated as moderator's question number 2 for our participants? Earth to Robin. Come in, Robin.
Pete?
Yes, Robin.
The challenge was that Emmy activated poll 1. And so we're stuck in that one right now. So I'm sorry, we'll have to do that later after.
Okay.
So when I repeat.
No, that's okay. Let me ask Emmy, can we go ahead and run poll number 1 then and collect that information and then do the next question? Because the moderator's question number 2 is directly relevant to this expansion question, and I think it'd be useful to get a sense of the temperature of the group. Can we run your question now, your poll questions now?
Yeah, I think we can make it work. Just as we're about to transition into talking about community engagement, because that's going to be an important part of this process, we'd like to hear from you guys, the community, about what are your favorite ways to be engaged, and what are ways that, maybe you're not being as engaged in. We have the questions live. Hopefully you can see them. But for my part, I can see the questions, but I'm not sure. Can you instruct me how to click on an answer? Yeah, so I think it should be as simple as taking a little survey online. So when you can read the question, and there will be a few options underneath each question. As you scroll down, there's going to be a total of 4 questions on this poll. And you can select which answer you feel aligns best with your experience in regards to the question. And what you're doing right now is helping the city figure out how, throughout our community engagement process, how can we reach out and meet the community where they're at, instead of waiting for the community to come to us with questions.
All right, so what I'd like everybody to do is to look at the the poll that's up on the window in your screen now. And Emmy, do you click on it to register your answer?
I think you'll probably have to click submit at the bottom. I'm not sure how it looks on the viewers side, but I can see that 9 out of 27 people have voted so far.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give it some time for everyone to have a chance to vote.
Right. So we're going to pause for just a minute here and give everybody just a minute or so of silence to go through and select their answers.
Pete, I think that since you are a co-host, you're seeing the back end of the survey. I know that I'm seeing the tabulation. Emmy, I'm assuming you're seeing that too?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll just, I can see a timer. We have 62% of the votes in. Hopefully we'll do this more rapidly than the votes are likely to come in on election day. So, so we're going to give another, we have another 30 seconds for folks to, the remaining, excuse me, the remaining 8 people to vote, now 7.
Or Sue can't vote though.
Is it possible to ask the question that I've put in twice now in the chat?
Yes, that's going to come up next.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we had 20 people vote. Okay, I will share the results. So go ahead if someone wants to,
Okay.
Amy or Pete.
So now, Emmy, do you have the, that was basically to collect data for you folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have that now. Do you need anything else from, in terms of discussion of those questions?
I feel okay not discussing it right now. Nicole, are you okay with moving on?
Yeah, what I'd like to move on to is the question about now, Robin, if you could ask the moderators question number 2.
Okay, relaunching polling. Will clear exist. Ah, hey, wait a second. So let me go out of that one. Why does it just keep, I apologize. Oh, here we go. Duh, okay, there we go. Was it question 1 or 2?
2.
Okay. About the city limit expansion, there we go.
Great. So the reason that I am interested in this is that we've just had a discussion a moment before about the questions relating to expansion. And what I propose we do is answer this poll that's up there. You vote in the same way you did before. This one, select the, it says multiple choice, select the one answer that is the best answer. So the assumption of this question is if there is a projection of additional land, the necessity for additional land or additional space anyway for dwelling units particularly, what are your views on the options that you see displayed there? And I want to get the results to that answer because that helps answer some of what Scott was interested in hearing from the community. And then I want to also, we can also talk in that context about the question that has been asked a couple of times now about that bears on the one of the aspects of the potential expansion. So let's give everybody another minute to answer the question that is up, you see up on the screen. All right, Robin, can you share the results of that with the rest of us? So 7 of you took the view that you strongly supported expanding the city limits to meet future demand for housing. At the other end of the spectrum, 5 chose either strongly oppose or gently oppose the expansion. I'm going to ask in a second for someone who was, or perhaps more than one person, who was strongly supportive of that to talk a little bit about why that is the approach that you would take to expanding, meeting future demand for housing. And then I'm going to ask somebody from the other end of that spectrum. But in the meantime, I want to ask Scott and Nicole one particular aspect of potential expansion of city limits has to do with the relationship of that expansion with the question of defensibility in a wildland fire context, defensibility of those expanded boundaries, the expansion of the city limits being also presumably an expansion of the what's called the wildlands urban interface. And this has come up, as one of our participants has said, a couple of times in the chat room. So while people are digesting and getting ready to share their views on the poll, Nicole or Scott, could you talk a little bit specifically about how planning will take place, will take into account wildfire defensibility issues if there are proposed to be expansions of the limits?
Sure.
Doing an analysis of all the different possible expansion areas around the community, and there's criteria, related to the suitability of each and every one. And I've not been involved with one. The one we did just in Redmond doesn't really have a urban wildland rural fire interface, so that wasn't an issue that came up. But I know it came up with the city of Bend's expansion, and to what degree that plays into the criteria, I'm not sure. That's kind of why we have hired experts in this process, because they do this stuff a lot, and they know how to negotiate all the criteria. So, myself personally, I can't tell you exactly how it plays into it, but I know that it does, because I've seen it become an issue in other communities. So if that's something that, what some of these technical questions that come up that we can't answer, that we can provide feedback on to you guys later, we can have the folks at C4C post a response back on their website to see specific questions, and we can get a detailed answer back to them on that.
Sure, and
Right.
just to add on, so one of our statewide land use goals, again, relates to natural hazards, which for us really relates to wildfire. So outside of just the UGB expansion, we will be looking at ways to mitigate for these natural hazards. And I think it's a great opportunity for community members to weigh in on what your priorities are. Is it defensible space, or is it more building code requirements? That's really a lot of the feedback that we're looking for, is that we know wildfire is an issue. How do we really properly mitigate for that through our comprehensive plan, policies, and goals, which are then incorporated into our development code? So outside of just the UGB, that will be likely a key topic of discussion throughout this process.
All right. Let me go to the poll question then that you still see on your screen and ask, is there someone from among the group who strongly support expanding the city limits to meet future demand for housing? Someone there who'd like to volunteer a bit of an explanation for why that was ranked, why you chose that as a strongly support position. And again, to emphasize, there are no right or wrong answers to these questions. These are.
Yeah. Pete, Nick Vorosky here. I'd be happy to comment.
Go ahead, Nick.
First of all, I should say that I do not live in Sisters. I've got a significant investment in downtown Sisters. I live in a suburb of Portland, and I emphasize that. And I've been in my career, I've been a developer of workforce housing. and specifically subdivisions to support workforce housing. And what I have seen over the last few years in markets that restrict either through their boundaries or through decisions on the types of housing that they will allow in, is that the population is growing, and a simple supply and demand curve is driving the cost of housing through the roof, so that workers and certainly young families and millennials cannot afford to buy housing. I read some of the, in fact, I read all of the comments on the recent Sisters Woodland project, and many people recognized and commented that their children were unable to find housing in Sisters. Workers were unable to find housing in Sisters. I get, there's a lot of sources of data, and I get information from First American Title that publishes a market activity report. And the current report for Sisters says this: the median list price of a home in Sisters right now is $1,190,000. The high price, there's one real high price one, but the the median is intended to balance out the basically negate the real high prices as opposed to an average. And that those kinds of prices they're going to eliminate the ability of young families to move into Sisters. And I'm not, if this, to me, I think that's contrary to some of the desires expressed in the Sisters Country Vision, which I participated in pretty heavily. And Sisters, I think, is extreme in that. If I'm active in a market in Oregon City where I started following that 8 years ago, the median price was $250,000. Now the median price by the same source is in the $550,000 range. Pushing young people, millennials, lower income workers, I say lower income, but I really mean workforce families out of participating in the housing market, really pushes them out of the ability to create wealth through real estate ownership. And there's a lot of statistics about what real estate ownership, housing ownership does. So that was the reason for my comment. Sorry to be long-winded on that.
No, I think that's helpful, very helpful. How about somebody who was inclined to oppose gently or strongly the expansion of boundaries as a solution for increasing available land for housing? Is there somebody on that end of things that maybe would want to speak to their views on that issue?
Pete?
Yes, sir, Jim.
So I was gently opposed, and I guess that's because I don't have enough information. I certainly understand what Nick said. Like him, I'm outside the city limits. I guess I'd like to know why we're expanding the city boundary, what part of the community might be added to the city boundary, and what its purposes are for. So I think if the comprehensive plan intends to add property to the city boundary, I just think that they need to examine which property and what its purposes might be, so that people who are adjacent have a better understanding of what's being proposed.
I think the last part, particularly of Jim's remark, goes to a question that's come in on the chat. Would an expansion be only for homes or some commercial? And And to be clear, we're not talking about land that the city is going to purchase, right? This is just a zoning overlay or a use overlay on properties that for the most part other people will own. Isn't that right, Nicole? We're not talking about the city buying land elsewhere, so there's no expense in that sense. But these expansions would not necessarily, in spite of the poll question, wouldn't necessarily be limited to housing, would they? They could be for other purposes as well.
Correct. So in kind of pointing back to the slide that's in front of us, so keeping in mind that this comprehensive plan includes an economic opportunities analysis and what's called a buildable lands inventory. Both of those, as Scott mentioned previously, are highly technical studies in which we hire a consultant, Angelo Planning Group and Johnson Economics, to really take a look at trends, our population, what the city needs. And from that, only if we were to consider a UGB expansion, we would need to figure out how many acres of land would need to be for housing, for employment lands, industrial or commercial lands, how many acres we would need for park space, and potentially how many acres we would need for public facilities. So it is a pretty refined exercise that needs to be done before, of course, the city could even consider the potential of an urban growth boundary. Scott, do you have anything you wanted to add to that piece?
Summary. I would just add that, yeah, it could, in Redmond, we require that some of these new developments in the urban growth boundary, once they came in, and once they're in the urban growth boundary, doesn't mean that they're going to be brought into the city for urban development immediately. Some of these properties will take years and years and years to develop, and it's not a requirement that anybody annex. These properties can stay the way they are if they want. It's only once somebody wants to do something different or urban level densities do they come in for annexation. Otherwise, they stay basically as they are. But there was requirements that we provide mixed use into those urban growth boundary properties, so that that people didn't have to drive all the way in. This is, I guess, maybe a bigger issue for larger cities, but they didn't always have to drive into the middle of the city to get the uses that they needed. So there was a requirement that some of it be mixed use, mixed with residential. But yeah, there's no decisions have been made, and we got a long ways to go. There'll be plenty of opportunities to react to a plan before it ever went forward. So we're just talking in generalities right now about what will be considered and we're required to accommodate the population growth. We can't just say no expansion, no infill. We'll have to come up with some kind of plan to how we're going to accommodate that future population.
We took a little detour away from the slides in the presentation. Let me return the controls to Scott and Nicole for them to pick up where they were before they were so rudely interrupted by the moderator. So.
Oh, no problem at all. So yeah, so great transition here. So yeah, just wrapping that up, the other piece of a UGB expansion study is looking at the most desirable land to incorporate into cities. And DLCD, the Department of Land Conservation and Development through the state, has ranking criteria. So you have to look at a variety of things, including proximity to existing city resources, whether or not there are natural resources like a beautiful lake or stream that you don't want to disrupt, whether or not it's used for farm and forest land already. All of these are part of a pretty complex ranking exercise that needs to be conducted as well. So quite a bit that goes into that UGB piece. So again, just kind of tying back into this slide. So right now we're in a lot of the information gathering phase. So again, this comprehensive plan does take a lot of technical information to start with. We are gathering that in order to come to you for online open houses, for in-person community engagement events, in order to review a lot of that material and then take a look at goals and policies to really prioritize how you want development to look in the next 10 years and how you really want the built environment to look for the next 10, 20 years. So this schedule kind of outlines again where we are in the project. So we're doing a little bit of project initiation. Our consultants are working on those technical documents. And then really this winter and spring and summer, we're going to get into the meat of it and really develop a lot of those policies. A review of the draft plan is scheduled to be available by August of 2021. So it is a pretty expedited timeline. throughout all of that, we're going to be doing quite a few community engagement events. Again, as we mentioned in the beginning, we are building on the vision, but we really want to include all voices. So the benefit and disadvantage of being in a COVID world is that we aren't able to get out for large meetings at City Hall anymore. But I think that's a really fortunate circumstance in that we're able to come to you in your living room, come to you when you're at Ray's, come to you with a meeting in the box if you don't want us there as city staff. If you want to lead your own meeting, we're here to provide those resources for you. So with that, Emmy is going to take over our presentation and talk a little bit more about specifically what community engagement goals we have and how we're planning to move forward with some engagement strategies.
All right. Hi, everyone. So as we enter this, 10-month process of community engagement, we have these community engagement goals that provide a very important foundation for, listening to the community. We encourage everyone to get involved and stay involved throughout the entire process, and, provide many opportunities to, have your input received. And partly, like Nicole said, we have to do it in a safe manner, but that also creates opportunities for creative engagement, whether it is small groups meeting one-on-one with community members and getting input in that way, or the meeting in a box where, in a sense, we pass off that facilitation opportunity to local community members so that when they are meeting in the groups like they typically do, they can host discussions about the comprehensive plan and provide their small group feedback directly back to us. And we want to ensure that that input is reflected in the final plan and that you understand why it is how it is in the final plan. And as I heard someone say when they said they gently opposed expanding city limits, we want to make sure that we provide the information for you all to have an informed opinion and have quality discussions about these topics that the comp plan will be covering. And we encourage participation of all people, race, ethnicity, age, disability, income, all of that. We understand where we have our gaps in reaching certain groups. And so one thing that we're trying to do is meet people where they're at. Because right now it's, we can't go face to face as easily as we could. And in a sense, we're utilizing opportunities where people are already gathering, like C4C, to reach more people that we typically wouldn't see. Moving on, Nicole also touched on a couple of these engagement strategies, such as the meeting in the box, or we may see you at Ray's sometimes. You might see me tabling outside of a local business, talking about different land use development techniques or methods, kind of displaying what growth could look like. How do you feel about it? We'll be hosting virtual open houses, and that'll be kind of managed through our consultant, APG, and look out for that coming in December. And we also have our social media that will be kind of feeding some information through, which is the city's Facebook. And we have our own project website, sisters2040.com. And that will be, if you have a question or want to get in contact with us, that is the best way to go about learning more about the comp plan, what stage it's in, what are possible events coming up that you can partake in. So we have, we will continue to gather community input over the next several months. We're going to have that open house in December. As we have the economic opportunities analysis and the housing needs analysis, those are going to be updated through our Johnson's, or I guess I forgot his name, but our economic consultant. And we're going to continue to, work together to go through this process, draft up goals and policies, and come back to the community with those and hear, okay, how do you feel about this? Is this something that, aligns with the community, and continue to have that cyclical review process and continually coming back to you all. And I'm going to show you the website next because we encourage you to sign up because that'll be the best way to stay up to date on the latest and greatest things about the comprehensive plan. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. Okay. So this is the Sisters 2040 Comprehensive Plan website. It's beautiful, and hopefully it becomes a great tool for you all to learn more and to reach out to us at the city. This here's the homepage. It kind of just briefly talks about the comprehensive plan, what it is, why is it happening right now. We have a little introduction about the housing needs analysis, the economic opportunities analysis, and other policies that we'll be considering with the future vision. And at the bottom of the very first homepage, this is where you can sign up to receive updates about the comprehensive plan project or be notified about events like the C4C event so that you can continue to be engaged and share your input with us. At the bottom of each page, you will find the contact information for Scott Woodford and Nicole Murdell. So if you have a question for us directly, you can always find us there. I'm going to move this box. Okay, so for the nitty-gritty information about the comprehensive plan, you can find it here under About the Project. We have the project schedule, which is something you've already seen, and some more details. You can find the comprehensive plan, which has the, which shows that, urban growth boundary map that we've been talking about. Oh, everyone's signing up now. That's great. I'm getting all these notifications. We also have the FAQ page. So if you have a question about the vision, about who, what, where, why comprehensive plan, come here first and read about it. And if you have more questions for us, please feel free to reach out. And here's a little information about the project team. You can learn about or find how to contact the city staff, as well as the consultant team who's working with us on the comprehensive plan. And this is the best page of them all, get involved. So here we have a little announcement about, be a community voice. We're still looking for community members to be on the community advisory committee. If you've always wanted to be more involved in, city government, city council, but you can't commit the multi-year term, this is a great opportunity to, learn more about your community, help out each other, and it's less than a year commitment. And you can find more information about the committee on this website. And here is where you'll find the application, and it's due by the end of October 28th, at the end of this month. Again, on the Get Involved page, you can sign up here for our newsletters. I'll send you a little email update here and there about upcoming meetings or documents that we've released out to the public. Here's also where you can directly contact us with any questions you may have. And that way you can have another avenue of reaching us. And lastly, here are project documents. So these will be kind of the framing documents here for the comprehensive plan and what we're building off of, as well as, yes, Pete?
Could I ask you a question that came up on the chat, which is if a person is interested in seeking to be on the advisory board or advisory committee, do they need to be a Sisters resident, or could they be a resident of Sisters country with economic or social interests in Sisters?
So I think we do have seats for both. I think there's a limited amount of seats for people living in Sisters country. It's like 3 or 4 seats, and the rest of the 14 seats are for people living in city limits or representatives of community organizations. But yeah, I think that's it for the website. Please, if you have more questions, let me know. But well,
let me put one to you that's come in on the chat that I think is an important one, a particularly important one, and that is a fair amount of the work on the revision will be dependent upon technical reports or studies prepared by others, like projections of economic need or need for real estate for land or the like. How transparent will those materials be to members of the public? And will there be a separate, who will evaluate those materials before they get mixed into the planning process itself? Is that a city council action, for example, or who does that?
Answer to that question is yes, there'll be public documents and available for review. I think this is a good spot right here where we will post that information once we get it, and we'll also do Facebook announcements or other methods to let the public know that those documents are available to review. They'll be reviewed by our community advisory committee and our stakeholder advisory committee initially. The Planning Commission may have some role initially with those studies before it gets to the final step. But yeah, the answer to the question is yes, they will be available. We want the public to be able to see them and understand them and ask questions.
Great. Emmy and Scott and Nicole, are there more materials that you want to share in terms of your presentation with the group?
Open to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Emmy.
Oh, I was just gonna say at this point, I think it's free game. I'll let Scott.
Fire away.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to suggest was, Robin, can you bring up the moderator's question number 1, the poll question about topics and ranking, because I think that will be a good point at which we've talked about a lot of different issues, and maybe we can. So you should see on your screen now a question that says, which one of these topics to be covered in the new plan is most interesting to you? So again, pick one. And so, these are 6 of the really 14 statewide goals. These are the titles of 6 of the 14 statewide goals that really will apply to us. And as Scott said, we're not probably going to have a part of our plan that deals with the oceanside issues. So, take a minute now. I'll give you another minute to answer this question, and recognizing that, again, these are just chapter titles. They're subject matters that will be addressed somewhere in the plan. All right, it looks like the poll is closed with 20 voting. And Robin, can we share those results with folks? There we go. So kind of as we did with the other poll question, you can see that the distribution of interests. Again, this is an artificial thing because the plan has to cover all of these things, and people may have important views about each of them. But let me start with, I think we've heard some about housing already. Let's talk about economic development. Is there someone who identified economic development as the area of most interest to them in this process, who'd be willing to share their views about why they rank that as the #1 issue on their of most interest to them? There were 6 of you who said that was your top most interesting element.
Well, Pete, thanks. I can speak to that. This is Caprielle Lewis, and I'm the Economic Development Director for the Sisters area. I'm an independent contractor to the City of Sisters, but I've been a Sisters resident for 15 years. And I mean, obviously that is a concern, but right along with economic development is the housing issue. that we face in Sisters. And a lot of that's in regard to workforce housing. So with the recent approval of both the Planning Commission and the City of Sisters for the middle parcel, I hope that that will take some pressure off some of the pressures that our local employers, key employers have in terms of their top concern being housing for their employees. So in terms of economic development, I was hired to help diversify our local economy. We are very tourism dependent, and just as we're witnessing and have through the different economic cycles, tourism is great, but we do want a healthy, diverse, and resilient economy. So I work with local employers to help break down barriers to their success in business development of Sisters. So that's why it's a top concern for me.
How about someone who identified transportation as their top issue? Is there someone who wants to talk about that? And I note that one question that came up both in comments that some of you made when you registered and also now online, including one just now from Susan. In the context of transportation, the question of walkability came up as a quality of life in Sisters that some people are interested in preserving. So I don't know if that was a factor for someone of the 5 of you who said transportation was the key issue. Is there a volunteer there from the transportation interest group that would like to explain why they felt that was a critical issue for them?
I will, Pete. This is Annie Marland.
Hello, Annie.
I've been working with COIC and Cascade East Transportation, I'm Molly, on the RP-TAC, which is Regional Public and Transportation. I'm on the action committee helping put together the county's plan to meet the 2040 state plan on transportation, and I've been working very closely on bringing better transportation here to Sisters by bus. And so I have some things I can certainly contribute to that because it has to conform with city.
Thank you, Annie. By the way, I want to mention that Cappy wins the Best Background Award by far here in the... how about recreation needs? I think early in our discussion, we had a brief discussion of whether the plan would include, and indeed, I think the answer was it would, that would include questions of parks, but perhaps one of the 4 of you who marked recreation needs had some idea about recreation needs in addition to or in lieu of parks. Is there somebody who wants to speak to that one?
I'll volunteer. A little bit about my background before I came to Sisters 6 or 7 years ago. I spent 13 years on the Willamette Lane Park and Recreation District Board of Directors. So clearly I have a little bit of a bias there. I think these are all important, but I had to pick one, so that's the one I picked. I'm also on the City Parks Advisory Committee. I think what makes the city work well is green space. And as we develop, as we look at where we're going to go, the importance of having parks and facilities for recreation close to where people live cuts down on transportation and makes a better lifestyle for the folks that are there. So that's kind of why I picked that one. A lot of people say, well, you can go a mile out to the forest and you can recreate all you want. But the reality is that for some folks, that's not a good decision or choice. And so we need to have something close to where people live and something more than maybe what we're having in some of our current large developments where there's a small open space that we're calling a park, but realistically is maybe 2 building lots cobbled together. So that's me. That's my opinion. So there you go.
All right. How about the category of that's labeled as urbanization, and often in planning documents, this urbanization question is linked to questions of density of housing, particularly of housing. Is there someone who marked urbanization as their top priority that wants to volunteer to offer perspective on that.
I'll volunteer. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, and I'm the one who mentioned walkability as well.
Okay.
And frankly, I wasn't quite sure what urbanization meant, but I marked it anyway. I love the walkability of Sisters, density within the business community, yes, but what I don't want to see is turning our residential communities to have the business community extend into our residential communities. So I guess that was a strong interest of mine. The density is fine, and maybe this overlaps with the transportation, but not to blend the two, so that we can maintain our walkability, our residential community. Pardon?
Our sanity.
Our sanity, my husband just added. I think Sisters is unique in how it does work, and I would like to see that maintained. So,
well, I'm gonna depart from the poll results now, and we can, Robin, you can take those down now. And I want to transition then into that very question that Joan just mentioned, both in the vision plan and in the some of the comments, including apparently Joan's, that when she registered, and that those of some others as well. There's a general notion expressed in a variety of different words, but the common theme is that many commentators wanted to preserve the small town, the qualities of small town life, or the qualities of current life in Sisters that commentators felt are in some way threatened, or at least in tension with the potential of growth. And I wanted to maybe kind of end with opening, not end, but ask the question among this group of what are the qualities of living in Sisters that you hope would be continued through the comprehensive plan and expressed in the comprehensive plan? What are the elements that about life and the quality of life in Sisters, sometimes as I say, identified as quality of life in a small town, that you would like to see, if you would like to see those qualities continued into the comprehensive plan? So I'll just open it up to whoever wants to comment on it.
could I just add one quick thing, and that's that density, yes, diversity, please, but you can do those things within a small town environment. I once heard at a city meeting someone say something about not disrupting the hallmark quality of our town, and I just cringed, because I think that is the image we want to run from. Because it's not valid in any real world. I think we need to be careful about how we define this, what we love about a small town.
I think that's the question I'm inviting folks to comment on. Yeah.
I'll comment on that because that is pretty important to me. I like the small town feel, and what that means to me is that people recognize a lot of other people in their cars, on the street, at meetings. There's some familiarity based on our engagement with one another. It adds to our resilience to have people feel connected to one another, and to have processes in place where we can help one another. That's kind of what a small town does, is even if you have diverse opinions and are wildly politically separated. If there was a disaster occurring, people come together because we're human and we all belong here and we have a sense of belonging here. So that, to me, is what I hope we can continue to foster in Sisters Country.
You know, you said that very well. And personal note, a few years ago, I had a ladder driving accident, and which resulted in an ambulance ride to to Bend. But before they could get me out the door, I had neighbors on my doorstep from across the other side, 2 blocks away, who saw the lights and knew it was my house and wondered what was going on. That is part of the small town feel that you want to keep. I think that as we look at development and we look at where infill and exfill might be within the community, one of the things that may meet some needs are looking at some of the times where we have a residence above a business and maybe they're all tied together. The people who run the business live upstairs or something like that. Those are some ways to kind of meet both needs without having to take big chunks of land. And lastly, I've been through some UGB discussions at my time in the Valley. They're never easy. They can polarize communities faster than anything you've ever seen in your life. And it's not a fast process. So I think the thing we need to do with this comp plan is work as neighbors and friends and make it as sisters friendly and far reaching as we can make it. And then when we have to make those hard decisions, at least everybody knows why we're making them or why we're not making them.
I just would like, so I'm Elizabeth. Sorry, I don't have my video on. My internet's not great at the moment. But I just wanted to add on kind of to what Joan and Chris were saying, in that I think that our interconnectedness and like being able to depend on each other is really great, and like I love that. But with back to like the Hallmark thing, like we need to be accepting of everyone and be willing to bring them into the community, because I know a lot of people feel that like based on our Western facade and based on just like looking at us from the outside, it's like an outsider looking in, where I feel like we need to keep that interconnectedness, but also bring the diversity into it. So that's what I've got.
I note that Elizabeth joins Susan and Gary for taking the leap into the electoral process and becoming candidates for the city council. So we have 3 of the 5 candidates for positions on the city council. So thank all 3 of you for, well, all 5 of you, but the 3 who are here tonight for making that kind of a commitment of your time. Thanks. Other folks who want to comment on this discussion?
I wanted to make a comment. This is Christy. A lot of what people are saying here tonight is resonating with me, especially the comments about the small town culture and connectedness of the people. What Annie said about transportation. I hope that in this plan we can think about not only what is valuable about Sisters that we like and how we can preserve those characteristics of the city, but think about the future and how different it's going to be 20 years from now. There are going to be things that maybe we can't foresee right now. We couldn't foresee what 2020 was going to be like and what we were going to have to grapple with in terms of trying to keep our economy going, keep connected to each other, finding new ways to do that. So I hope we can find ways to make our economy and our culture sustainable in kind of the new normal. I don't think we're ever going to really go back to what was normal before. And so with the challenges of more frequent fires, dealing with, pandemic, who knows how long this is going to go on or how it could repeat, or what other things that we can't foresee now. how do we prepare for those things to make our city resilient and make our prosperity and our culture sustainable? And just be thinking forward about how do we do things different to keep what we have and preserve it.
I just want to add that as we're talking about all of these plans and moving into the city and talking with people in the city, that there's a real awareness and effort to work with our Spanish-speaking community and with our other communities that are in other economic spheres and are working with so many issues to even maintain a lifestyle in Sisters, and that those people with housing, with their needs and everything are as much in the forefront as all of the other needs, and are very important and are part of the inclusivity, and that all of that it's in the plan, but that it's really within the plan of being a part of this community.
Pete, this is Annie.
Go ahead, Annie.
I would like to include senior citizens. We are becoming a retirement town pretty much, and but a lot of citizens are stuck at home. I'd like to see that in the plan we consider things that will make their lives better, have access to the parks, access to transportation. And I don't think we have to include them.
Okay. Thank you all. My intention is to just now give open the floor to anything that anybody wants to say for the next 5 minutes or so, and then wrap up. So it's all play, or as we used to say when I went to the skating rink in South Eugene, all skate. And so anybody have something that they want to get off their chest about this process that we haven't touched on already?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So what I'm hoping to see somewhere in the plan is a future city plan, a plan that shows, okay, if we do an urban growth in this area, how does that look, aerial view, how does that look as a city growth plan? Do we have bike paths that connect? Do we have a circumventing bike path or walkway? Do we have connecting parks? Because all of the best cities are planned growth. And instead of having someone come to our town and say, oh, I'd like to build something in your town, and I'm going to cross all the I's and cross all the T's and dot all the I's, and then you're going to accept me, because if you don't, I could sue you. So we should have a plan that says, this is what we need in this area. This is an industrial area. We need this in there. This is a housing area. We need that in there. And then so that we're ahead of what is needed in the town, rather than it coming to us and just plopping itself.
Thanks, Susan. Other comments on things we haven't talked about already? Chris, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, I don't have the solution for this, so there's not a suggestion, but I want to bring up my concern. Is I lived a good part of my adult life in Alaska in a rural community, very much like Sisters, based on tourism and art and environmental activities. And right across the bay from us, what was once the major hub for the lower Kenai Peninsula, I watched it die. It was such a cute little town that everybody wanted to come there, and they did. And eventually the people from the larger community of Anchorage bought second homes there to the extent that there were no workers because they couldn't afford to live there, and there were no jobs because some of the major industry either burned down or they left. So then what you had was this cute and environmentally cute little community that people couldn't afford to live in, and it started to go down. The school population went down with it, and the people who came wanted to have it as a nice little place that could serve all their needs when they came down in for fun. Weren't really supporting it. And I fear that possibility for Sisters unless it's part of this kind of planning, because we are a very popular place for second homes. And I don't know how you control that, but I think it has to be thought about and balanced with attracting families, keeping seniors who lived here all their lives affordable, and providing workforce housing. It's a dilemma, but I've actually seen it happen, and I don't want to see it happen here.
I would just like to support and say that's an extremely important concept and issue you just brought up. Thank you.
Can I say
Leanne,
something?
go ahead.
Okay. I too, Chris, have spent a lot of time in that place in Alaska that you're talking about. And I just want to commend this group. Being in a place like that where things don't always happen the way we would like to see them, and also in Maui where my brothers are planners. And it can be so divisive, and it's so incredibly encouraging to see all the participation and the positive discussion that's happening. The actual conversation that's happening is fabulous. I would also encourage us to look at and think about the young businesses that are happening here in this town, and that, you know, the courage that they had when COVID started to reach out for support was a model that a lot of us can follow, and that I would like to see built on and encouraged in our outreach efforts. I'm thinking about the farmers that we've got here in town, who set great examples for us. So how can we take more advantage of the skills that they're bringing? But I just want to thank you guys for pulling all this together. This has been really encouraging, actually. Thank you.
Well, that's maybe a good note to turn to our closing remarks then from Chris Lang, who's going to talk from the standpoint as a C4C board member about C4C's activities. And I think probably she'll tell us a little bit about what they're planning, and then we will adjourn. So go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Well, our next Let's Talk is planned. It's always the third Monday of the month. And so the next one will be November 16th from 6 to 8 p.m. Obviously on Zoom, because I don't think anything's going to change in the meantime. And we will be focusing on our new law enforcement officers who are just coming in to Sisters. And you know, there's been a lot of stuff going on in the news all over the place regarding the interface between law enforcement and the community and diversity and lots of things. So it'll be nice to have the opportunity to meet and have conversation about whatever you'd like. So please feel invited. I want to thank tonight's moderator, Pete Shepard. He did a lot of preparation with the team to organize this in a way that would invite a lot of, nobody can hear the claps, but let's show him our claps. Thank you, Pete. And as well, I want to thank our city planning staff, Nicole, Emmy, and Scott, who put together an interactive process and a great slideshow, and they are obviously interested in our input. So please, let's all take advantage of that opportunity. Thank you to you guys too. It's encouraging to see people who are running for office who are wanting to hear our voices right now. So thank you, Susan and Gary, for being here, and Elizabeth. And I guess I want to acknowledge the other members of C4C who are here. Weren't wearing a fancy hat like Wendy, but thank you for monitoring the chat room, Wendy, and Robin for being our hostess. But we also have Jim Barnett, who is on the board, Jane Paxson, who is also on the board, and Amy Bergstaller, who is also on the board, as well as myself. So C4C is about creating connection in the community and civil dialogue. So thank you all for participating and signing up today, and I hope you will next month as well.
Great. Thank you.